Go live, Vegas on the screen, feeling the flow, so pristine. Boom, as the beats align, electric dreams, they intertwine. Neon dreams in the digital stream. Lights flash to the sound, surreal extreme. Feel it. In the heart of Vegas, we're living the scene. Go live, we're all on the beam. Watch it, feel it. On live stream, the pulse, it races, pounds, high stakes, wild chases. We're the stories, we're the faces. In the city, where the bright lights gleam.
We just need to forget about everything. Put away our problems. Get along with each other.
All right, welcome on in, off and running on a Wednesday from the Go Live Vegas studio. It is Student of the Game. I am Brent Lawson. So happy to be with you. Hope your hump day is going well. And boy, do we have plenty to talk about this time of year. We are neck deep in the Stanley Cup playoffs. We are neck deep in the NBA playoffs. We have plenty of baseball to discuss. NFL schedule release is coming tomorrow. We got fights to talk about. We got a little bit of everything under the sports sun. And what an awesome time to be with you. As again, we are off and running from the Go Live Vegas studio on all of our social media and digital platforms, including the Go Live Vegas app, available on Apple and Android. So be sure to check that out, as our man Aaron, the brains behind this entire Go Live Vegas operation, has been hard at work regarding everything app related, as we are so excited to unveil new features pretty much on a week-by-week basis at this point. But again, so much to talk about today, and obviously we have to start with the NBA, especially based off the recent developments that we have seen on the hardwood as of late. And as recent as last night, we really have to begin there, because obviously you have so much to talk about with the dominance of the Thunder and the Knicks since the last time I've seen you. But with that being said, perhaps the most interesting series you could possibly conjure up, that you could possibly ask for, we are seeing take place between the Spurs and the Timberwolves. And of course, with all the drama that went forth, or that took place and proceeded and went forth after Game 4 with Victor Wembanyama, the elbow, the suspension, the debate if the suspension or the ejection, the debate if the ejection should lead into a Game 5 suspension. Of course, that doesn't happen. He returns and he proceeds to go off in dramatic fashion. In 33 minutes, he notches 27 points, 17 rebounds, 5 assists, went 9 for 16 on his field goal shooting, 2 for 5 from downtown. And we talked about Wemby as far as what he brings to the table. And we know the type of athlete he is. We know the type of skill set and the body type he has. But what we are seeing now is what he can truly do when his offense fully solidifies itself. And we wondered if, because of Rudy Gobert and because of the physicality and the athleticism that the Timberwolves have, we wondered if his offense would at any point in the series truly take over. We knew the defensive acumen and the prowess would be there. There's no question. Just look at the guy. It's always going to be there as long as he's healthy and an active player in the NBA. But can he really take over with the scoring? Can he really take over offensively? And we saw last night that absolutely he can do that, especially when you piss him off. Especially when you piss him off. And I know a lot of people were talking about, yeah, he shouldn't have been playing. It was dirty. Whatever you like, a lot of people were full-blown defending it because without him, the series isn't as good, which is completely fair. But if he did something that egregious, then you can't really use that as a justification. A dirty play, you could use it as justification. It's not that heinous. What he did was immature, hot-headed, emotional. That's fine. And no, he shouldn't get a pass. But I'm happy they did not proceed with a suspension, or excuse me, the Game 5 suspension, and just kept it as an ejection. And I'm very happy that we got to see him last night, even though he still deserved very much a slap on the wrist in Game 4. I'm happy we got to see him be out there, even though that moment shouldn't have been forgotten. But when you have performances like this, you quickly forget about it. Because now the Spurs lead 3-2. Now you think they're in position to take it. And it's all setting up for what we thought it was going to be all along in the Western Conference, Oklahoma City and San Antonio. But I don't think this one's over. I really don't. I think we've seen enough from Minnesota in the games they've won, particularly in Game 4. I think we've seen enough from them that suggests that this game could go 7 series. And while I do think San Antonio takes it when it's all said and done because of Wembanyama and just because of the style of basketball they play, I think they match up very well overall against Minnesota. But I think Minnesota does enough to force a potential Game 7, right? Now, just saying this right now, I don't know if any of them or either of them naturally matches up against OKC. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I think Minnesota has shown enough traits and displayed enough features that suggest that this could easily go Game 7, even if Wembanyama continues this offensive trajectory. The question is, will Ant-Man show up? Will Gobert do just enough to where Wembanyama can't completely take over? That is a question because now Minnesota faces elimination. They're in an elimination spot, but I think there's no reason that this can't point to a Game 6 win. And ultimately, I think when it's all said and done, we're seeing the best series we will see in this round. Outside, of course, of Detroit-Cleveland, but you don't quite have the same type of star power. Don't be wrong, Cade Cunningham has been great. James Harden showed up when he needed to, and the role players for Cleveland and Detroit have been exemplary, right? They've been exceptional. But it's hard not to focus on the star power that both these teams possess. Because even in Minnesota, we're actually good enough. That's huge for the trajectory of Anthony Edwards, right? Huge for the career of Rudy Gobert, one of the premier defenders of his generation, right? Maybe the greatest. So there's a lot at stake here for some of the young T-Wolves players that we've kind of glossed over because we're so caught up on what has happened with the Spurs and we want to fantasy book this Thunder-Spurs matchup, and I get it. And it's San Antonio. There's always been a certain infatuation that has surrounded them, right? At least ever since Pop really solidified that dynasty. Really multiple stints of a dynasty, if you will, right? Almost not even a dynasty, more like a sustained run. That's what made San Antonio so impressive. It wasn't necessarily an individual stint here and there. It was a sustained run of greatness, of excellence. And because of that, they are a very, very public team when you think maybe they wouldn't, because coming from a market like San Antonio, who only has one pro sports team, despite it being a very big city. But the Spurs have always been a commodity, much more than Minnesota has. But this series is a reminder of the young studs that are going to take over the game for about it. You see glimpses of it in Detroit and Cleveland with Cade Cunningham, right? Harden is obviously an established vet. If anything, Harden's in the back half of his career or at the back end of his prime. But it's so cool seeing these young athletes really try to carve their legacy now because we've seen early semblances of it. We've seen it from Ant specifically, and now it just seems like it's Wembanyama's time. However, is it going to be enough when it's all said and done based off of who they have in front of them? Because as we know, in the West, all roads lead to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And it's looking like, in terms of hoisting the Larry O'Brien trophy, period, it's going to go through OKC anyway. And look, the Lakers were game. The Lakers fought hard. But I said on this very show, Austin Reeves, it seemed timely with his injury in the back stretch of the regular season. and he missed some playoff time, but you were able to get him back right in the amount of time when you needed him in a series like this. But without Luka, there was just no hope. There just wasn't. LeBron was great, given the circumstances. Reeves struggled early, started to get something going, but it's just not enough. Not to beat a team like that. And what stands out, really what's stood out now for 2 seasons regarding the Thunder, is just how well-rounded they are. It was the story last year. It's been the story all year long this year. They are so complete as a team and check so many boxes. Even if you have Luka Doncic in the mix, good luck. It doesn't matter who you throw at them, because unless you are as complete and balanced as they are, it's going to be very difficult to beat them, right? SGA is a star, no doubt about it. And some of the other players they have on the team are notable players, even if they're not household names. But name a weakness the team has. It's all strengths. Even if they're not necessarily maybe the best in the league, like by far and large, like alone away from the rest of the pack, even if they don't really stand out in any particular department or category in that regard, name one weakness that they have that's so glaring that you think it could potentially hold them back. You can't name one. They have everything. They check every box. And it's team-oriented basketball with a whole lot of depth where you see the stars of the future and really of the present in SGA, right? And, of course, with Jalen, but then Caruso. And then some of the other pieces. Haberstein, Chet Holmgren coming into his own. Young guys really solidifying themselves, veterans reminding us how important they can still be in the right system and in the right role. You're seeing that all with OKC. That's why it just feels like it's their time universally, because they're doing so many things right. It's not necessarily that they're so dominant or that they're so much better than everybody else, or it's like a fantasy roster or, a super team. It's not that. It's that structurally, internally, they are so well designed. And teams like the Lakers, without their best scorer, are just not going to be able to stay in the hunt. And that's why I wonder, even if we see an incredible performance the rest of the way in the Spurs Timberwolves series, and if it is Edwards, right? If it is Wemby and whoever it may be, is it still going to be enough? Is the team complete enough? We'll find out, lo and behold, and I'll be here to talk about it on this very show. But it's hard not to ask those questions, and it kind of sucks. It kind of sucks asking all those questions. Do all roads lead to OKC? Because you could kind of ask it on both fronts with the West and the East, which leads me to the New York Knicks, who have been as dominant as any team we've seen in the playoff in recent memory. Last time I was on the show, I was wondering, oh man, could they be struggling against a Games Hawks team where CJ McCollum is playing out of his mind? And boy, how quickly did the tune change and the tide turned. Oh. Next thing you know, 3 consecutive games with 25 points or more in terms of the deficit. Next thing you know, the 76ers are in a 2-0 hole. Game 3, you're thinking, all right, they fight back. They get a little momentum going. In Philly, the game's a little bit closer. Lo and behold, the Knicks win. Right? OG Anunoby's been outstanding. He gets hurt. You think Philly, after the emotion of the Boston win, and even though they may be drained because of that emotional win, and they, quite frankly, are outmatched against a Knicks team, maybe Game 4 is the one for the sake of pride. They get a gentleman's sweep, right? And then the Knicks ended in 5 games. I'm a Knicks fan. I'm thinking that's going to be the case, simply because the 76ers match up so well with them on paper and on the court from an X's and O standpoint. And it was not enough. It wasn't even close to enough. What we were seeing from the Knicks, regardless of how good and well-rounded the Thunder are, is one of the most impressive runs you can imagine, possibly from a team that only has 1 championship and is trying to get their first in, 50-plus years. That's how dire this feels for Knicks fans, because this is their best shot in a long time. And now with Mike Brown in his first year, who knows when they're going to be this good or at least this hot again, with all the factors, all the pieces really shining. It's not a complete team in the same way OKC is, but all of their key contributors, Mikal Bridges, posterizing Joel Embiid, Josh Hart being nasty from downtown, and of course the dynamic duo of Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson, who really are the story, perhaps, at least offensively, of the whole playoff tournament so far. So it just seems like the inevitability behind the Knicks and OKC, makes you want to expedite this whole process, kind of fast forward a little bit, just because it seems like we already know who's going to be in it. But it also makes me more interested to see how they're tested up until that point. I don't know if anything Cleveland or Detroit brings to the table. We'll see how their game pans out tonight. I don't know if either of those teams bring anything to the table that could slow down or keep the Knicks offense at bay. Just like I don't know if San Antonio is good as they are when Victor's going off, and I don't know if Minnesota is good as they are when Ant's going off. I don't know if they have enough in the tank to really go toe-to-toe across the board with OKC in a full 7-game series. I think they'll get their wins in. I don't think they're going to get swept like the Lakers did. But it's just so hard to envision anyone topping them. And the Knicks have entered that conversation as well. And you can make the case, while not as good of a team, the Knicks have been more impressive than OKC. So, again, when you have teams that dominant, you shouldn't overlook it. Now, the Anunoby injury hurts. The Knicks offense isn't as dangerous without him. But with this time, with this extra rest time, because they were so dominant in their sweep, plays in their favor. Now, I do, before we go to break, I want to talk about Philadelphia really quick because, as we know today, the big news of the morning, Daryl Morey out, right? Longtime owner helming the team. And it was one of those things where Philly fans across the board this morning, maybe not necessarily collectively like good riddance, but you could tell it's all like, all right, well, it's time to move on. Because everything from the trust the process to the coaching cycle, even if Nick Nurse seems like the right guy, and everything with Embiid and all the drama, and even the emotional win of finally beating your rival, but the Boston Celtics, and of course all the things that they have to deal with, and all the pill they have to swallow in the offseason of having the 3-1 lead, and Joel Mazzulla being arguably coach of the year, but absolutely having a meltdown, laying an egg when it mattered against your rivals, right? Like, as soon as we pivot from Boston's woes, what they have to face in the offseason, we now immediately pivot to Philadelphia, who, after in tremendous fashion, beating the Celtics, straight up got their asses whooped. And this is coming from someone who actually thought they'd match up a little bit better because, again, what Embiid and the size and Maxey and Edgecombe and even, Paul George doing absolutely nothing from the field. Like, all these pieces that were there that seemed to really stack up well against New York, even if the tank is completely drained after the series against Boston, you got to do something. And you can't let Philadelphia get overrun and invaded by your rival sports town because the Knicks took over that venue. The Knicks fans, rather, just like the Knicks players took over the series on the court. So when you get your ass whooped that bad against your rivals, and Joel Embiid, after gutting it out with the appendectomy and his great performance against Boston, you forget about that really quick. And that's the case on the national scene, and it's especially the case in the local scene when you're dealing with Philadelphia and the local media, the talk radio, the columns, right? People have been critical of Morey for a while now anyway, but he's now out. So what's the next step? Boston hasn't made those type of moves, and I don't think they're going to do it with Mazzulla. And obviously Brad Stevens isn't going anywhere. But where's the change? Because even with New York, you got the change. They were in the conference finals last year. Played really well in the playoffs under Tom Thibodeau. Now they look even better under Mike Brown and look like they're going to represent the East in the finals. There was an element of change for New York. A good team became even better. And OKC is just circling around doing the things they already did well last year, which is why they're looking like repeat champs. But what's the next move for the Philadelphias? What's the next move for the Boston Celtics, who on the court, in terms of personnel, seem like they have the team, but for some reason continue to underwhelm time and time again in the playoffs, no matter how the scenario or the narrative shifts. So for all that, and I've talked a lot on this very show about how the NBA has a lot on their plate for the offseason and a lot to handle and a lot to deal with in terms of the brass and Adam Silver and everything with the tanking and the TV product and the league at large. And it's fair because they do. But we've had a damn good postseason so far, and we've gotten to see two dominant teams shine. We've gotten to see them perform in as strong a fashion as you could possibly imagine with these two sweeps. And now, with the Lakers out, with the Sixers out, right, highly public teams that get a lot of attention and coverage, now the focus shifts to who is going to be the best potential roadblock, the best possible adversary for the Knicks and for the Thunder, respectively. We'll find out in the next couple of nights because I cannot wait to see where, again, this Wolves-Spurs series and tonight where this Pistons-Cavs series go I hope they both go 7 games. I mean, that's just, even if it's wishful thinking, they both kind of shown they potentially can, right? Much like in the Stanley Cup, you know early on if it looks like a series is going 7 or if it's going to be quick, right? You knew Knicks Sixers was going to be quick. Even if it wasn't 4 games, Lakers Thunder, even if it wasn't going to be 4 games exactly, it was going to be quick. Everything about Pistons and basically what you saw last night with Wemby back in the mix, I'm starting to feel that one could go 7 as well, and I hope it does. Because, again, the longer you could flesh this out, the longer you can give us something good before the shift focuses to the negative, I think we need that. And I've been critical in the past about how the playoffs, not every series should be 7, but we're deep enough now to where I wanted as many of them to go 7 games as possible. And I want as much good basketball that we could possibly get on television moving forward because, again, the tone and the conversation is going to be highly negative over the course of the summer. So until we get to that point, entertain us. Speaking of entertaining, Go Live Vegas, we like to think as a beacon of entertainment here locally and, of course, nationally. And if you're local, our Go Live Vegas app offers some great features that my man Aaron has been working hard at. So go check that out, whether it be tourists. If you're a tourist, as Aaron just tells me, it may be the best you could possibly download because if you're visiting and you want the inside scoop on everything happening with nightlife, with sports, with entertainment, with events, with food trucks, with everything possible, with the weather. And, of course, if you're a local trying to fill yourself in on the exact same things because Vegas moves so fast and the schedules change so often, it's hard even as someone who lives here 24/7 to keep track of. Well, fear not because the goal is that. And, of course, with all
our content, like I said,
we pride ourselves on an entertainment network that likes to tap into just about everything. Well, guess what? With the Go Live Vegas app, you will have all our content, all our archive shows, our live shows, our podcasts, our remotes, our studio-based talk shows, anything we do as far as conventions in town that we've really gotten, we've done more frequently as of late. All of it can be found in the Go Live Vegas app, as well as profiles and about information regarding our shows and our honored personalities. So much to be excited for here on the Go Live Vegas front, and we want you to be a part of it. So go download that app on Apple and Android. We're going to continue to plug it because, again, my man Aaron deserves it for the elbow grease he put in. But we're going to take a quick break. Still got so much to talk about. Again, baseball is looking great. We're a month into the season. We got the NFL schedule released tomorrow in the wake of the draft. The dust has settled. We're now already starting to look forward to the fall. And, of course, the thrill, the annual thrill of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So don't go anywhere. Soon the game continues on the other side from the Go Live Vegas studio. Talking plenty more when we come back. Keeping things rolling here on Student of the Game on a Wednesday, live from the Go Live Vegas studio. Plenty to talk about. And, of course, we have so much on the radar in terms of active sports. But it's never too early to look ahead to the fall, and it's never a bad time on any sports media platform to talk about the NFL. And I just want to – it's going to be quick. It's going to be brief, but it's just a couple of thoughts regarding the schedule release. I've never been big on it as an actual event or a big broadcast to put out there. I prefer the days when you just, the day of, the afternoon of, you check on your phone, you read an article, you fill yourself in, right? You get a push notification that reminds you of this or that. We've already gotten the leaks and certain things given away, including the primetime spot between my New York Giants and Dallas Cowboys to open up Sunday Night Football on week 1. That's cool. That's juicy. That gets you excited, at least me as a fan of that team. But at the same time, we know who the opponents are. If you're a dedicated fan, you at this point already know who you're playing. A lot of it's predetermined just because of the divisions anyway. You know if you're playing the AFC North this year as one team. You know you're playing the NFC South this year as one team. And, of course, games you are going to have, or 6 rather, that you are going to have against your divisional rivals, right? So you have that automatically in the vault that you know is going to be a factor. You already are timing it out because a lot of times it's on a 4-year basis anyway. And even if you don't know the sequence of it all, you know who is going to be in the game. Or, excuse me, you know who's going to be on the schedule, and you know who the games are going to be against. So, and I was texting my buddy about this morning. There are some cases, right? Like if you find out it's like a West Coast team, like if you find out your Chargers or the Dolphins or somebody are going to Lambeau Field or Soldier Field in late December, then okay, I get it. But for the most part, unless weather plays a factor, you're really just looking at the sequencing. And in terms of how that looks in the schedule, it doesn't really matter until you know what type of team you have anyway, right? You don't know how hard or easy a schedule truly is. We always try to gauge it with the strength of schedule, the difficulty and all that. And yeah, a lot of times it does pan out, right? I mean, I've seen my Giants the last couple of years have brutal schedules. Some teams just have really hard schedules. Some teams have really easy schedules. And you know that's going to be the case. But you know that's going to be the case before the sequencing anyway, right? You know it's how hard a schedule is likely going to be, at least off your best hunch, based off of what we've seen the year before from these teams. You know how that's going to be. The actual order in which they take place, that doesn't matter until September, right? So it's something to get excited about because like the combine, like the draft, it's kind of like another mark in the timeline, right? Another benchmark that you know you're that much closer. It signifies that you're that much closer to the fall, just like rookie camps and off-season, OTAs, mini camps, everything in between. And, of course, leading into training camp and preseason, it's like the hard knocks time of year. It's a countdown. And because of that, you're going to get really excited because it puts something into concrete detail. But for me, now at this time of year is really more when you want to, at least if you're a bettor, I know not everyone is, but if you want to get on some betting action, now's when you focus more on the season win totals. Now is when you focus with the draft and free agency in the rearview mirror. Now is when you focus on how good you think the team is actually going to be because you already know their schedule. And if you are one of those people who get hung up on the release of it all and the sequencing of it all, well, then you have no reason to wait after tomorrow. Because after tomorrow, by 6 p.m. Eastern time, I believe, we're going to know how it all looks. And now there's no reason why you can't get some early action. Even for people who like to plan early on their fantasy teams, if that's what you're all about. Right? Like, now's when you could kind of start to put things in place, even if it seems all smoke and mirrors, because you have enough that's tangible that you could go off of. And that's why the draft and free agency need to pass first before we could get to this point. So it's almost more like a timely thing. I don't think the NFL schedule release necessarily changes how we look at this point in the offseason, but it shows that now we at least are far enough to fully turn the page, right? The draft order is set based off of 2025. With the draft done, now that 2025 draft order, or that 2026 draft order that was determined in 2025, is now irrelevant. Now that the schedule is set, everything how last year panned out and turned out is irrelevant. So if anything, it shows that we have fully turned the page at this point in the offseason to the next year. 2026 is now the focus. And in a way, that was kind of the case the day after Super Bowl Sunday. But now there's no reason to look back at all. You don't have to put anything in perspective as far as 2025 is concerned, because now we're far enough in the offseason where we could talk about that. And I'm not going to hammer it too much. I'll do it a little as we get a little bit closer. I like to do it unless we get like major NFL news, right? Like if we get some major news regarding Aaron Rodgers or something else here in the next couple of days, that's different. But I don't like to I don't like to prognosticate or get overly analytical regarding the NFL as far as my season outlooks and my previews, at least until we get a little deeper in the summer. And maybe that's just personal preference. I feel like I enjoy the sports calendar more when I could let NBA, hockey, and a lot of these other things, the early part of the baseball season, digest, right? Not to say I'm not paying attention to football. I'm paying attention to football probably closer than anything in like life, right? But I'm not going to get too hyped up about this team's doing this year or this team's doing that this year. I'm going to let it breathe a little bit more. And if you get excited about the schedule release, that's fine. I'm not going to judge you for that. I'm not going to eat your lunch for that. Good for you. But I'm just not one to do so. Like, I'm not going to come in here a few days after it's released and do like a whole 30-minute special or like a special podcast just on the schedule. I'll do a special NFL preview when we get to August, right? So it's just one of those things. I don't know. I'm just kind of like going on and on about it, but I want to clarify that because I think like since it's NFL offseason is such a big deal, anytime we get a new development, that doesn't necessarily mean that that takes priority over everything. Now, if you get major news, then yes, you get big enough news in the NFL, right? If it's truly newsworthy, it'll be bigger than a Game 7 spot in anything you see in hockey or basketball the rest of the way. But the schedule release is not that. That's what I'm saying. It's not that. And the NFL and Goodell have really tried to make it that in recent years, but it's not. And that's okay. That being said, you should still get excited. If your team had a great offseason, you should be, realistically optimistic, let's just say that, because even me as a Giants fan, who I think they've had a great offseason, I'm going to pump the brakes. I'm not going to get too worked up. It's just one of those things. But it also just kind of shows that the football culture never truly takes a break. And that's what's fun about the offseason, because right when you think that everything in the NFL is dormant, something else pops up. And no entity, no organization, no sports league has been able to make something out of nothing the way Goodell and company have for the offseason in between, mid-February all the way to, I'll even say early August. Because at this point, you could count the preseason as part of the whole journey, if you will. But to me, schedule release, I'll look at it always. But I'm not tomorrow night going, oh, here we go. Time to turn on NFL Network and glue my eyes to the TV. Like, no, I'm good. I'll just check out the article on my phone and I'll be fine. And then next time I join you guys in the show, then we can go a little bit deeper. Speaking of deeper, though, I do want to go deeper than I have really as of late into the Stanley Cup playoffs, because boy, has the action that we've seen so far warrant some discussion. And look, I get it. We're Go Live Vegas. I've worked in the local media and the national media for quite some time, so I know the difference in in appeal and how you're supposed to cover these things based off your audience. And we like to keep it as general and national as we possibly can in terms of this type of show. But again, as I mentioned, the Go Live Vegas app, very exclusive what's happening in the Valley. Vegas is in the branding of this very network. We do live remotes promoting local events and local businesses. So we're never going to shy away from the local aspect. It's hard not to turn this into full-blown local Vegas sports talk when the Knights are doing well. And it's not even because it's a bias. It's because every year the Knights are in the hunt. They seem to be the most interesting team in hockey. They were the year they won it. They were the year they went when they shouldn't have, as in their inaugural season when they had no shot to beat the Capitals, but were there anyway, right? Even in the years they've come up short in the playoffs to different teams, right? The Oilers, the Sharks over the years. I mean, this is a team that's been around for like 10 years, damn near almost. They've had the ebbs and flows. They've rode the wave enough at this point. They've been around long enough to do so, right? The Kraken, the Mammoth, they're still earning their stripes in that regard. The Knights have, and they have a Stanley Cup to boot. And it just seems like now, looking for another one, once again, their quest, even if they're not the best team in the hunt, is the most interesting. And you know why? It's because they have the perfect foil in the Anaheim Ducks. Everything the Ducks brings to the table contrasts with the Knights perfectly, and vice versa. And we are seeing the depth and the line changes of the Knights become a factor like it did a few years ago. And they are giving us just enough drama and suspense to where we also can't hang our hat on too much confidence, because Hurdle's in a slump. The offense seems to disappear sometimes in the middle of a game. And everything at this point really is about clutch performance and goaltending. That's what's so interesting about it. And, with the Golden Knights, I understood why people were a little worried after the first two games, because the offense goes dead silent in game two, isn't really present in game one, which is a goaltender win. And it makes you think, all right, if Hart doesn't play his mind out, are they going to be good enough to win the series? And next thing you know, they bounce back, and you think the edge or the momentum goes to them. And then Anaheim has a big counterpunch, and you think, all right, even series, game 5, here we go back in Vegas. And last night goes down, overtime, dramatic fashion, another type of this outstanding late performance from the Knights when they needed it. But it's also telling, if you have to win games that late in overtime, this team is pushing you to the limit. This team is pushing you to the max. And I get it. It's the Stanley Cup playoffs. In no atmosphere is the goalie not going to matter, right? It's like saying pitching and quarterbacking don't matter in the playoffs for baseball and football, right? Of course they do. Just like, of course, goaltending matters. But if the Knights offense goes cold and Carter Hart slips up, will that be the end of it? And it was kind of pointing that direction. But the last couple of games, even with the hurdle slump, we have seen the offense show up when they need to. And it's only a matter of time until Jack Eichel splits the post again. He's due. Until Barbashev splits the post again. He's due as well. But we are seeing like the heroes that this fan base has embraced now for the past couple of years. They're stepping up when they need to, right? How did we saw it against the Mammoth? We saw it with their backs against the wall against Utah, because Utah was game and scrappy. But they've showed a lot of heart, a lot of grit, and a lot of fight. And if there's one thing I like about the Knights, I can trust them to swing themselves out of a corner. Guns blazing, clenched teeth, both fists going. If there's one thing you could count on the Knights, is that they will make it interesting to the very end. And that's why talking about in basketball how it just feels like Detroit, Cleveland could go 7 games. It's starting to feel like maybe San Antonio, Minnesota can as well. This one from the get-go felt like it could truly be a 7-game series. And at this point, I'm going to be disappointed if it isn't. It feels weird saying that, because in order for that to happen, Anaheim would have to win the next game, right? And then they would have to return to Vegas. But how cool would it be to win it, right? In front of the hometown fans, in the castle, game 7. But again, if Anaheim wins this, the next time I'm on the show talking to you about the Ducks getting it done, there'll be a lot to give them credit for too, because they have shown to be the exact same, different style of play, but the exact same type of team. A clutch team who you cannot count out of the fight no matter how late it goes. It could be overtime. It could be double overtime. It could be the final seconds of the third period. You just cannot turn away. You just cannot blink. And that's what really makes the Stanley Cup playoffs so fun, because where in the NBA, as I've complained in the past how I don't think all the series should be 7 games, the NHL goes quick, it seems, because these series from the get-go are thrilling. Right, you could make the case the Stanley Cup playoffs has the best first round of any playoff bracket out there, and we saw that last round. Now this round, it's topping itself, and you can just look at the Golden Knights and the Anaheim Ducks alone and not look anywhere else. But we're starting to see some of these other teams really make their presence known as well. But what's interesting is that, kind of like in the NBA, those teams lack drama, because the main story for those teams, like the Avalanche or like the Hurricanes, is just how good they can be. As opposed to how good the series is, it's how dominant will they ultimately look, like we are asking about the Knicks and like we were asking about OKC. How good are the Avalanche really? Because they're looking pretty damn good. And they're looking like an inevitability. But according to Vegas, and not the Knights, the odds makers, I mean, the Hurricanes are now the odds-on favorite. So you have a dominant team who has looked like the sure thing in Colorado. You have a team like the Hurricanes, who the wise guys and the bookies like even more apparently on the future board. And you have a team in 2 teams in the Anaheim Ducks and the Vegas Golden Knights who are going to be a thorn in the side of anybody they play, even if they may not be as well equipped as Carolina or Colorado. But I love it, because hockey, the beauty is that this time of year in hockey, you could be a casual fan, you could be a diehard fan. the game is going to overtake you the same way because it's playoff hockey. Playoff basketball isn't always good, right? Playoff hockey seems to always be good. You're rarely going to find, right, Aaron? How many Stanley Cup, you're a hockey guy, how many Stanley Cup playoffs from start to finish have you watched in your lifetime that have just sucked from entirely? Not many, right? Maybe a few here and there. There's always exceptions. If his team loses, that's a good answer. I like that. And that's what I'm saying. I feel like a traitor for saying that, I want the Knights Ducks to go 7 games because that would mean the Knights would have to lose. But at the same time, I want more hockey or as much hockey as possible. And that's one thing before we pivot to another break here. Aaron mentioned when we were off air, it's very much like the Tampa Bay Lightning. You think it's okay, they're a good team, but now their days are numbered, their time has come. Now's the time they get the hard boot and they do a hard reset and they have to readjust, right? You count them out too early and next thing you know, they bite you where it hurts. The Golden Knights have a lot of that in them. And they've done this now with 3 different coaches. Really 4, but they've had a chance to make a Stanley Cup with 3, essentially. And bringing in Ports initially looked great. They started to lose some steam, so you're wondering if they were going to meet a brick wall in the playoff. The Mammoth probably played better than most expected, and the Ducks caught them on the chin early. But here they are, and it's just like what Aaron said. It's like certain teams you just can't count out, really in any sport, but especially hockey, where there's an intensity and a physical element, and veteran leadership goes a little bit further than it does in some other sports. You just can't count teams out who play that type of hockey, who play that style, that brand of the sport. And Aaron just said, right when you think the Stanley Cup playoffs twists, it turns. Right when it zigs, it zags. And that's what's so different. Because we watched the NFL playoffs, right? We saw the postseason. You knew it was going to come down to Seattle, the Rams, right? Likely Denver. Like, you just knew that was going to be the case. In baseball, which we'll talk on the other side, even if some of these teams are struggling right now, you know who's going to be in the hunt when it's all said and done. Hockey, you may have a general idea because some organizations are very well run and very well coached, but the ebbs and flows, sometimes it just feels like a heavyweight fight or like a roller coaster ride. And even if you're not a diehard hockey and are kind of just figuring out as you go along because you may be a little bit new to the sport, a little bit of a novice, that's part of what makes the Stanley Cup so appealing. It's the type of sport that could kind of be under the radar for majority of the season. And once you start watching the playoff action, you can't walk away from the TV. So it's like a train wreck. Exactly. There you go, Aaron. That's why I wanted to open up his mic. It's like a train wreck. You can't look away, even though at the same time, it could be chaotic and you could be brutal. And who knows? For the Knights and the Ducks, it may be that, but that's what makes it fun. The Vegas fans are going to be going crazy. Anaheim has not had a lot to cheer for lately. And if I can make one more point, that brings me to another take that I think that my buddy brought up last night that I think should be reiterated more. And I get hockey doesn't have much national coverage in the media compared to other sports. So the conversation surrounding the league and the landscape isn't the same. But hockey is parity, man. The Buffalo Sabres, the Habs, right? The Ducks. Some of these teams that were absolutely irrelevant just a few years ago, like the Knights and some of these other ones, we're used to them being in the mix, right? Colorado, they've been good for a few years. They just won the Cup the year before the Knights did. Like, they're a little bit more relevant and recent. Some of these other teams with great fan bases, with a tradition rooted in hockey, right? And they're still in the mix. The Flyers had their best year in a long time. Carolina, I can't remember the last time Carolina was an odds-on favorite to hoist the Stanley Cup. It's pretty damn interesting. And unlike basketball, hockey doesn't need to impress before the offseason. Unlike baseball even, it doesn't need to impress. It just needs to be hockey, and by doing so, it will impress. Speaking of impress, this is the generic part when I use like the last word of what I said to segue into teasing the app. But I got to tell you, what my man Aaron has been doing with this app is impressive in its own right. Again, a lot of hard work, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of coding, a lot of technological BS that I have no idea in terms of how it works and all that, and I'm completely in the dark about, but I've seen the final product. We're streaming on the at least most up-to-date product that we're streaming on right now. And if you're watching us, you can watch any of our shows like that. You can be notified of them. You can watch our archived episodes, find out more information about the network and the on-air personalities, and of course, everything that's going down in Vegas. It's a truly immersive and interactive app. And of course, we're available on all of our social media and digital platforms as we have always been, including our YouTube page. Comment threads are open. We want to hear from you. Join the conversation as well. We're accessible as we've ever been. We're interactive as we've ever been, and we want you to be a part of it. So don't go anywhere. We still have plenty more to talk as we wrap things up on Stu the Game. And as I like to do, I like to go to the fights in the because I could talk some prize fighting, whether it be in the cage or the ring. And we're kind of in the middle of the week now where we could reflect back on what took place a week ago, or last weekend in combat sports, but could also look ahead to what's to come this week in the fight game as well. And oh yeah, you heard me teasing it. We got a little baseball to talk as well. So don't go anywhere. Stu the Game wraps up on the other side from the Go Live Vegas studio. Dust off the shoulder as we come back from break here in the Go Live Vegas studio on a Wednesday. Again, it's always a fun show. We could talk about just a little bit of everything. And I like to reserve, unless it's like really, really big in the news cycle, I like to reserve the combat sports talk for the last segment. But I do want to get on baseball really quick just to touch on this notion that, we got it all figured out a month into the season. No matter if you're a fan of a big market, a mid-market, a smaller market. And I get it because if, a lot of people hit the baseball hard out of the gate early on, right? They hit it just from the jump and become obsessed with it, even if their interest wanes in the middle of the season as you get into the summer months. And because of that, you get a lot of overreaction. But because of that, you also get a lot of evidence of what teams really are, right? Like the Yankees have already have surged and have slumped. The Dodgers have done the same. Several other teams have, right? That are just playing Major League Baseball in the regular season. Because when they've looked good, they've looked damn good. The Yankees starting pitching is incredible. Rodon and Cole haven't even come back yet. We know how good the Dodgers are. If they're in a slump, fine. It's May. Like, this is the time to do it if you're a team that good, right? But what we do also know from looking at Major League Baseball in the first, 4 or 5 weeks or whatever, is who is an absolute disaster? The Philadelphia Phillies, the New York Mets, right? The Seattle Mariners. All major disappointments. The Toronto Blue Jays, not looking great. And then in the meantime, you have the teams who you thought would be good and, somewhat relevant, like the Milwaukees, like the Cincinnatis, right? Like the San Diego and the Cubs. But in the mix with them, you have the Tampa Bay Rays surging, right? You have teams that you thought would kind of be bubble teams, be the story of baseball so far, and the teams that you really thought you could put a lot of stock in, they're borderline unwatchable. So it's kind of interesting. I kind of like it because I talked about a lot. Baseball, we don't think it is because of the Dodgers' recent success, and we don't think of it like this. Baseball has more parity than any sport. That's why if the Dodgers, if anything, they deserve credit because it's hard to go back-to-back in baseball, let alone, it's hard to be consistently good in baseball as a contender, let alone go back-to-back or even appear in the World Series in back-to-back years. To win the pennant 2 years in a row is crazy because the carryover for baseball in between the injuries and in between the short stints that guys are on teams. Like baseball, you bring in mercenaries. You bring in heroes for hire in baseball. They're on the team for 5 minutes. Next thing you know, they're gone. And if it pans out to where it gets you where you want to be, all for the better. Maybe sometimes that player will stick around. A lot of times, nope, bye, see ya. Like Juan Soto was in a Yankee uniform for a year and played in the World Series. It's so easy to forget about that already. What, a year and a half or what, not even 2 years later. Like baseball, the turnover happens so frequently. I like the fact you have so many teams that were favorites to win their division early on struggling, right? Like Detroit. I thought Detroit was going to represent possibly the American League in the World Series this year. Very disappointing. And meanwhile, the Atlanta Braves, who I was very big on last year, who I talked about a lot on another show I hosted with two former co-hosts at this very set, and I was very big on the Braves in 2025. That blew up in my face. They entered 2026 decimated with injuries, and next thing you know, they're the best team in baseball right now, and it's looking by far. Whether it be just the sport in general or, of course, the National League specifically, that's how good the Braves are looking. But then you have the Cubbies, you have the Padres, you have some of these other teams, Tampa Bay, Cincinnati, that are looking very formidable. And it may all fall by the wayside. And in baseball, everything changes after the All-Star break and after the trade deadline anyway. But I kind of like the fact that we are sitting here in early May before Memorial Day. And we could say, yeah, the Phillies suck. The Mets suck, right? Like, I don't know if that'll continue to be the case, but if you dig yourself in a deep enough hole, it's hard to climb out of it. And we've seen teams go on runs. We get it. It happens. Texas was irrelevant at the All-Star break a few years ago, and they wound up winning the World Series, and they got hot. It happens. And we've seen teams hit the trade deadline big. I mean, I remember Houston brought in Verlander, led to a World Series, right? We've seen teams in Atlanta and Washington in recently, as of late, or at least, the last 5, 6, 7 years or so. We've seen teams make moves, whether it be in the trade deadline or right before the season begins in the offseason, and the team looks completely different. And the conversation changes. Like baseball, other than maybe college sports, specifically college basketball, you reshuffle the deck quickly in baseball. And we are really seeing that. We are really seeing that. And that's what's fun about it, because I like the idea that the Cincinnati Reds are going to be more relevant in the National League as of right now than the Philadelphia Phillies or the New York Mets. Like, it's kind of cool. So when it's all said and done, yeah, there's a good chance the Giants and the Yankees and the Dodgers of the world will be right there. And maybe Toronto gets it together. But again, high-profile teams that are awful. That's a big part of the storyline. I haven't mentioned Boston. Boston may be the biggest mess of them all. So what we are seeing right now is really just a lot of chaos in Major League Baseball. And even with the teams that are playing well, like the Atlantas and like the Padres and the Cubs and so on and so forth, the Tampa Bay Rays, there still is so much uncertainty, because you have to wonder if those teams are really good enough to sustain this, which is what baseball is ultimately anyway, right? Marathon, not a sprint. It's a cliche. I get it. But never does it ring more true than the world of Major League Baseball. And we're seeing that play out here in the early parts of the 2026 campaign. So how to get on that real quick before I pivot to the fights. And again, like I said, doing this show weekly, and we are doing here specifically right in the middle of the week on this hump day. So you can kind of look back in the rearview mirror as to what transpired last weekend. But you can also look forward to what's on your doorstep coming up this Saturday. And of course, really quick looking back to last weekend in UFC 328. Monumental win for Sean Strickland, now a two-time middleweight champion of the world, defeating Khamzat Chimaev, the first loss of his career. Controversial to say the least, given how it all worked out. It depends on who you give, I guess, the fifth round to. Strickland was effective in landing the jab. Chimaev was effective with the takedowns. We know how good Chimaev's wrestling is, but it was never truly able to become a dominant factor in this bout like many thought it would. Strickland's takedown defense was very evident, and his ability to just land a lot of shots in volume, even if he can't really hurt, even if he doesn't really regularly hurt his opponent, right? He's had his stoppages and his big wins there, but if he doesn't regularly hurt his opponent, the volume, the defensive skills, and the stand-up exchanges, and just the way he incorporates basic boxing makes Strickland a very tough guy to beat or neutralize in one way, even if that is a strength of the other guy. So I think even though I thought Kamazat would impose his will at times with the wrestling, I think we probably overlooked Strickland's ability to defend takedowns. And let's be real, Vegas was dead wrong on this. And they were wrong in the co-main event as well with Josh Van and Tetsuro Taira, right? Not saying the guys who got the chalk shouldn't have gotten the chalk, but the gap should not have been that big. Kamazat should not have been the favorite. Chimaev should not have been the favorite he was, and Taira shouldn't have been the favorite he was, quite frankly, either. He was a much tighter favorite than Chimaev, but either way, we saw both those fights play out in razor-thin fashion. And I'll get to Joshua Van in a minute because that's big, but the Strickland win, some may say it's a robbery. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's a robbery when literally you can watch that fight and go up to anybody. And there's this general universal consensus where everyone can, even if you don't know anything about fighting, boxing, MMA, whatever, this general agreement where everyone could go, oh yeah, that guy won. There's no debate. And it goes the other way. We have seen decisions like that in the sport. It happens more often in boxing than MMA, but it happens in the fight game. These type of decisions that are close, the split decisions that could have gone either way depending on what you were looking at, right? Because everyone judges and scores a fight based off their own subjectivity and based off what they're impressed by. So if you like volume and if you like landing in, with the jab and in striking exchanges, you're going to give that fifth round and even some of the other razor-thin rounds of Strickland. If you like wrestling and controls and takedowns, you're going to lean more Chimaev, right? But ultimately, if you could have that debate, no one was robbed. You may think it's controversial and it may be polarizing, but Kamazat Chimaev was not robbed. I think it warrants an immediate rematch, and we were wondering with the way he looked, could the weight cuts be too much? It was at 170. That's why I had to bump up to middleweight, but we thought middleweight would be his permanent stomping grounds as a dominant champion. And now there's already rumblings about him moving up to light heavyweight. You have to wonder what's next for him. Now, I think an automatic rematch is in store. The fight was too close, and I think Chimaev still has unfinished business at middleweight. But say what you want about Sean Strickland. That was a hugely impressive performance. Even if you think Chimaev should have won, like I do, I was very impressed with Sean Strickland, who at this point in his career has managed to upset Israel Adesanya and Kamazat Chimaev in hugely impressive fashion. He was dominant against Adesanya, but on a clinic in that fight. This was much different. But the fact he was able to get his hand raised in both, you could separate your opinion of who he is as a person and what he spews out there, right? What he puts out there in terms of his media availability and really just what he puts out there on Twitter and social media in front of the fans. And a lot of fans are going to like him for that very reason as well, because they think he's authentic and they think he's genuine and they think he's the real deal. So he's going to be that type of figure for his entire career because he always has been. But don't let that distract you from the fact that through all the trash talking, through all the antics, and even through all the ensuing stuff that has happened since the fight ended on Saturday night, don't let it distract you with how good he is or from how good he is in the octagon, especially against big-time opponents when the lights are on bright and the stage is big. We've seen him come up short. We've seen him get his hand raised in memorable moments, but he's always there making it interesting. You don't do that if you don't know what you're doing in this sport. And he's a two-time middleweight champion now because of it. And now you're really interested to see the trajectory of Kamazat Chimaev moving forward, depending on what he chooses to do. Speaking of trajectory moving forward, Josh Van just showed the world what he was all about on that very same night in the prior fight in what was an awesome co-main event, one of the best fights you'll see all year, and really one of the best 125-pound championship fights you'll ever see, ever, period. What these two guys did was awesome. And what Taira, showing his chin after Van was just peppering him with the jab, landing hard combinations, dropping him, but not able to put him away until the very end with a beautiful right-hand shot. And yet Taira was there every step of the way, showing why he was the number one contender, showing why he has been such a, on a hot streak as of late. And for Van to get a win like that against a guy who is so tough, such a good chin, and such a good grappler, and for Van, who's had those question marks despite his striking skills, for him to prove that he could handle that type of win and go into the deep waters with the fire and the heat, right? all coming down on him with a game opponent in his first ever championship defense. I see why Joshua Van has the fan base he now has and has been accumulating, and it's only going to grow even more. The question is now, where does that go for him? Because while you should give credit for what he's done, the only reason he has that belt is because of a flukish injury to Alexander Pantoja. Now, with that match likely being the next one for both of them, because it has to happen, right? The first one never even got to get going, so we never really got to see what it was like because it was a freak injury. But two things can be true. You could say the only reason why Pantoja is no longer the champion is because of that, but you could also say Van could only fight who's in front of him. And against Tatsuro Taira, he was absolutely brilliant. And again, huge shout out to Tatsuro Taira for showing the world how tough he was and showing us all, or rather reminding us all, how great the flyweight division is, at least at the very top. All these years of Davison Figueiredo, Brandon Moreno, Darren Royval, these guys now, like 125 has some studs. And I think Alexander Pantoja may be the best to ever fight at that weight other than Mighty Mouse because of his skill set and just how big he is. He's a dangerous fighter who's a bad matchup against most guys. I can't say, even though he got the chalk against Van in the first fight, and I think he would be the favorite against Van in the eventual rematch, but I can't say he's going to dominate Josh until we see it happen, because Josh now looks that much more impressive than the last time, and I'm going to continue to put stock in him, even if I do think Pantoja may be one of the best to ever fight at that weight. And I think Pantoja is big enough to where he can potentially go up in to a higher weight and fight at bantam. But until that fight happens, give Josh Van his flowers. Give him all the roses. Give him all the congrats and the celebratory praise, because he earned it in that fight in which he had an awesome performance, an awesome victory, and the two combatants gave us an absolute show. Now, like I said, we're at the midweek point where we can look ahead. Flash forward into this coming Saturday, you have to wonder, will Ronda Rousey and Gina Carano do the exact same thing? Now, look, as we wrap up here, I'm just going to say this. There's no reason for this fight to take place. This fight really doesn't make any sense as far as the logic behind it. I get the marketing behind it, but there's no reason for Ronda Rousey to fight Gina Carano, given the fact that Gina Carano retired from fighting when Ronda Rousey was not even that far removed from winning an Olympic bronze medal in judo. Ronda Rousey was fighting locally out here in Tough Enough, the amateur promotion, when Gina Carano was wrapping up her MMA career. Gina Carano wrapped up her MMA career in 2009 before the great Max Holloway even entered the professional circuit, let alone fought in the UFC and established himself as a future Hall of Famer. Like, I'm just trying to give some context here. Until 5 minutes ago, no one was asking for this fight. In 2012, 2013, 2014, sure. In 2024, 2025, 2026, no. But it's happening anyway. And it's going to go down on Netflix on the Intuit, at the Intuit Dome. And they've added big names like Mike Perry and Diaz and Ngannou onto the card. And they're trying to do everything they can to take some of the shine away from the eventual or the upcoming White House card for the UFC. And I get that. But there's no reason this fight should be happening. That being said, the two most important figures in the history of women's MMA, given the fact that they laid the bricks, they created the foundation. Carano helped lay it for Rousey. Rousey helped lay it for everyone who's come since, right? The Amanda Nunez's, the Valentina Shevchenko's, and everyone in between. So again, the marketing writes itself, but the logic still doesn't add up. It'd be different if they were contemporaries, or if you made this happen a while, back in the past. But with Ronda at this point, disgruntled and trying to stick it to the UFC, Carano's trying to get back into good graces of the public, given her controversy, right, and how her acting career took a big hit. It's not necessarily desperate in the same way Floyd Mayweather Manny Pacquiao is, right, or the rematch in that. It's not necessarily desperate, but it does seem a little bit forced. It does seem a little bit contrived. And it just seems like something that they're throwing to the wall and hoping it will stick. And as of right now, it seems like it's going to stick because we could walk down memory lane. But what happens when the fight night is upon us? Saturday night and the fight goes down. And you have Ronda Rousey, who, say what you want about how she exited the sport against Holly Holm and against Amanda Nunez. Ronda Rousey last fought in early 2017. Now, I get it. 10 years ago. Long time. Again, Gina Carano last fought in 2009. Gina Carano's career was over before Ronda's career even got going. Like when Mike Tyson and Roy Jones fought. Mike Tyson and Roy Jones were contemporaries, right? It felt random. It didn't feel necessary, but it was cool because it was two legendary boxers who had never fought each other fighting. But at least their prime somewhat coincided. Gina Carano was already in hit movies by the time Ronda Rousey was a big deal in the UFC. It wasn't even like two ships passing in the night. Chris Cyborg, who gave Carano her exit in 2009 in dominant fashion, that was Cyborg's breakout. And by the time Rousey was big, Cyborg was already kind of considered not over the hill, but a little older. And people were wondering of a potential rematch or potential dream fight between Ronda and Cyborg, right? Never materialized because Cyborg wasn't in the UFC at the time. But again, it just kind of shows you what the time period we're dealing with here is, or the conflicting time periods, rather, the conflicting eras. So it's just hard to believe with Ronda, given the recency, the fact she trains more frequently than Carano, the stylistic matchup I think bodes well for. We know that Ronda, her undoing was the lack of striking, right? And the lack of striking coaching. And Carano's strength was always her Muay Thai kickboxing, and she was very, very good in that regard. She thrived in that sport before even coming over to MMA. But Carano hasn't fought since 2009, and she's fighting a grappler who's not going to bother exchanging with her, especially given how Ronda's last two fights went, even if they were a decade ago. And you have someone who just seems to be in much better fighting shape, is much more is closely removed from the combat realm as opposed to further removed like Gina is, and someone who, again, just seems like, given her professional wrestling in the gap in between and everything else she's been doing, just training on her own time, and the judo and the grappling, still doing training and seminars there, even if she's not actively competing. She's just closer to the vicinity of combat than Gina is. Even if Gina's done bag work and hit mitts and done all these great things, right, out at Extreme Couture, right out here in Las Vegas, it's just hard to fathom a reason why she could win unless Rousey really wants to play with her food. But again, going back to the wise guys one more time here, the odds are reflective as Rousey sits as a minus 650 favorite. Gina comes back as a plus 450 dog. Again, in UFC last week, and they kind of got it right, or they kind of got it wrong. Most of the time they get it right, and this is spot on. I hope we get a thrilling fight, because you know damn well I'm going to tune in, but there's no reason this needs to be happening other than for the individual careers of both of them trying to do whatever they can to stay in the spotlight. And if I have to indulge in that spotlight a little bit and play into it, so be it, because I'm going to check it out. Rest assured, I'll be damned if I don't. But at the same time, sitting here on a Wednesday, very hard for me to imagine that this is a barn burner or in any way delivers as any type of dream match between two icons of the sport, even though they are exactly that. And if anything, if there is a glass half full approach here, it's that at least these two legendary figures get to have a better final moment, at least have the opportunity, although only one person can win, right? And we don't know how that fight will go, even though I have a strong hunch based off the style and the odds. But Gina Carano's last time in a cage, the last time we saw her in a cage, her last outing was brutal. Ronda Rousey, I covered her last fight against Amanda Nunes. I was in press row sitting behind the fence in which she was getting annihilated and lit up with punches, right? Not exactly the best image to go out on. So if anything, I like the sense that both of them want to compete and change that final image, given the fact that, again, they both miss each other regarding their eras and they never were able to fight in their primes. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and act like, oh, this is going to really deliver in the same way the dream match we all want to see between Amanda Nunes and Kayla Harrison is going to. Now, again, it's apples and oranges. Those two fighters are in their prime, or at least exiting it in the case of Amanda. Big difference between someone who hasn't fought in 15 plus years and 10 plus years, right? Or 9 plus years. But it also shows that in fighting, nostalgia, in sports, period, but especially in prize fighting, nostalgia sells because if nothing else, you know who Gina Carano and Ronda Rousey are. You may not know who Amanda Nunes and Kayla Harrison are. So I'll be interested to see what the buy rate is. I'll be interested to see what the gate is at Intuit. They put on a great show at that venue, right? In recent years, that's been an awesome place to host events at Fights are no exception. I'll be curious to see how it all pans out. Netflix, as far as their presentation in the fight game, some kinks here and there, but they've done it long enough now to where they know you got to figure they know what they're doing. So I'll watch, and I look forward to sharing my reaction and my breakdown of it all, next week with you guys when the dust settles. But that's just how prize fighting is. It's the circus. You could think it's stupid. You could cringe. You can grimace. But at the end of the day, it's just it's pro wrestling that's not predetermined, right? You're going to watch it because it's on, and especially with the social media and all the buzz, that it's going to lure you in. At least if you like, Aaron shakes his head, if you like prize fighting. If you never want to watch people punch each other in the face, you're not going to watch it. But if you've liked at any point in your life people punching each other in the face, you're going to watch Gina and Ronda, you're going to watch Floyd and Manny, and you may complain the whole way through, and that's okay because that's part of the fun. But no true fight fan is going to sit up here and give an opinion on something, at least if they're a genuine fan. And in my position, an actual real, like a true proper host of the show, they're not going to give you a take on something they didn't watch. So I'm looking forward to giving an opinion on something that probably won't be very good, but something I will certainly be tuning into nonetheless. Speaking of tuning in, everything on the Go Live Vegas front you could find by tuning in. Of course, you have to download it first. So go on Apple and Android to the Go Live Vegas video app. I hear Aaron chuckling in the background, but that's because at this point we almost have a script of ways to plug the app. But at this point, it's seamless because, listen, he's been busting his ass for a long time. There's been a lot of moving parts in Go Live Vegas. We've been proud of our accessibility. This is only making that grow even more. We'll continue to be available on our YouTube channel, our social media platforms, but this gives us another avenue, another outlet to, reach out to you, whether it be with our programming and all of our shows and our hosts, but really just in terms of what's going down in the Valley. It could be tuning into a show. It could be checking out what time a live event is starting. It could be checking the weather, checking sports scores, checking where a food truck is or a restaurant, anything, getting event tickets, getting concert and sports tickets, anything as it pertains to a Vegas local, a Vegas tourist, or even anyone who just wants to enjoy some great content both in and out of the Las Vegas Valley. We urge you to check out that app. Like I said, my man Aaron's been neck deep in it, a lot of sleepless nights, but it's starting to pay off. Each week, it seems like we get a new, revamped, refined version. That's going to continue to be the case. So again, go check it out on Apple, on Android. It's available on both now. And again, we'll continue to be available on all of our other platforms as well. Again, you can catch all of our shows live and archived as you always have. Speaking of our shows, we have a fun one coming up here in just a bit with myself and Raquel Ellikis that we like to call Good Morning-ish. You may wonder why we call it that. Well, it's because we don't do mornings here at Good Live Vegas, unless, you want to work something out. We'll, for compensation, we'll do some stuff in the mornings. And Raquel shakes her head. Yes, you will. Yes, you're telling me someone offers you a wad of cash, you're not waking up? Okay, we'll see. I'll be in here at the crack of dawn knocking on your guys' door if the money's right. But again, go download the app. It's the best way to follow us and the best way to stay in the loop regarding everything that Go Live Vegas has to offer moving forward in 2026. And again, thank you so much for tuning in to Student of the Game today. Jam-packed show, so much to go over, and that's going to continue to be the case for the next couple of weeks. And of course, be sure to stay tuned for Good Morning here on the Go Live Vegas app.
All of our social media platforms.
With myself and Raquel. So enjoy the rest of the action. We'll have plenty to talk about next week when we do it all over again right here from the Go Live Vegas studio. It's Student of the Game. Again, Good Morning-ish coming up in just a bit right here on Go Live Vegas. Take care, everybody.